Hello everyone, welcome back to the Make It Your Business podcast. My name is Duncan Casey. I am the founder of Sprocket Limited. This is James Murray of James Murray Finance.
Hello.
And every week we talk about our journey as business owners, small business owners, micro business owners in my case, and all the trials and tribulations that come with it and what we've learned, because we spend a lot of time learning, because it's all about every day is a school day when you're a business owner. So today we're going to talk about the power of storytelling for your business, and we're going to cover off, certainly from my perspective, like filmmaking and narrative, but how our brains are wired for it and why it is such a powerful tool for you and your business, whatever that might be. We're going to talk about books that we've read, one of them being The Science of Storytelling by Will Storr, who you may know from the Status Game.
Status Game is it was his sort of initial sort of claim to fame, I think. Mm-hmm. But this book that we're going to be looking at today is called The Science of Storytelling.
Oh, sorry, what did I say?
No, did you say the Status Game? The Status Game
as well, but yes,
But yes, the Status Game was definitely his one. But no, I haven't actually read that.
No, I know of it, but I don't think I've read it either. So there we are. So yes, so we're going to talk about that. And obviously my background as a filmmaker and actor, narrative is in my bones. So it's...
You've also read this as well.
I've also read Who Not How by Dan Sullivan. Yes, I joined Strategic Coach tail end of last year and have been to a few of their things. I've met Dan Sullivan. I'll put a picture of that here. But I must remember to do that when I'm editing this. But this was one of the first books they sent me. In fact, I've got a duplicate of it as well, so you can have that. But it's a great book, so we'll get into that. I chose a sort of passage from it that I think is hopefully going to be useful for you today. So yeah, we're going to I think really try and introduce a bit more of that into the podcast, sort of taking books and or podcasts or anything we've kind of gleaned and sort of... And
product placement. I mentioned on a previous episode we weren't doing enough product placement, so for those that are just listening, we are in my offices at James Murray Finance, and I've got some of my literature and cups and everything around us. So, that's more of a joke, but also definitely
branding.
We're
got my branding going as well.
Yeah.
So it's all good. It's all good.
But I think one of the things we wanted to talk about, and I've taken some notes just so we can be really accurate with this as well, because you know what it's like when you read a book. After about a minute, you think that was a brilliant book, and then you forget everything that any of the actual specifics in it. You get a feeling from it, which is probably an underlying theme of what we're going to talk about, but you sometimes lose the specifics. And I think for our listeners and viewers, it would be important to highlight some of the key things, because one of the reasons that storytelling is so important in business is because it's an ultimate tool to connect. Ultimately, we are human, and humans love story, and we connect to story. And I think what we can sometimes do is we can sort of overvalue logic and analytics. And actually, sometimes we need to go back to the story of something, the very essence of it, to bring people on. And as we go through this podcast, we'll bring some examples of that, some real life examples of why that's important.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So with The Science of Storytelling, as I say, it's written by Will Storr. Go check him out. This book originally, and I think it's really its main purpose is for aspiring authors. So it's a bit of a strange one to maybe read as a business book. It's definitely not a business book to go and just take, because you're going to get lots of business lessons from it. But I think anybody that's interested in marketing or has an SME, has a business, or is a leading teams, I think it's actually quite important to read. So one of the underlying things in the book, and one of the sort of central ideas, is that every good story follows a structure. So a character facing a problem that then goes through a transformation. Mm-hmm. So Will actually writes, so this is actually from the book, he says, "We are all trapped inside our own flawed view of the world, and great stories show us characters wrestling with that." So that's where the audience leans in, because they can also see themselves in that struggle, and you can build that into your story of your origin story of your business, but also in the service offering that you're giving.
100%. I mean, in the film industry and in story writing in general, we talk about 3, 4, sometimes 5 act structures, and protagonists. As an actor, having played day player roles, supporting roles, and leading roles, I love doing leading roles because you're more reactive. Your job is to spend the whole thing reacting to the incidents that are around you, but obviously understanding the character and knowing the journey they're going on. But a good protagonist should leave enough room for an audience to fill it with themselves. That's the whole point. This is where I really bump into AI. When people talk about AI making movies, it's like, you don't understand what movies are then. Because they in order to engage an audience, they have to accurately reflect the human condition. And you're not going to, an AI can't do that. It can mimic it, but it could probably do it to a fairly granular level, but it isn't it, and it can't be. And I know when people talk about Pixar and animation and stuff, yes, but it's still got a human performance, and it's still animated by humans. It's still reflective of what it's like to be a human. And so, and when we talk about, typically movies follow a 3-act structure. You have your status quo setting, and that can be usually, anywhere up to an hour, but it's usually much shorter than that. So you're introduced to your characters, you know who they are, you know what they're about, some sort of guiding philosophy. And if it's written well, that can be in just a scene or a line of dialogue even. And then you've got your inciting incident, which is what changes them, what shakes them out of the status quo. And then the second act is them wrestling with that, going on their journey, whatever that looks like. Third act is obviously resolution. Sometimes you'll have a denouement, or you'll have something at the end, a button on the end for whatever reason. Flash forward 3 months and they're doing whatever. But that's, and then you should understand your character, you should understand where they're at, and then you should understand the journey they're going to go on. Being aware of their underlying principles, so that you can. That's the whole point, is so you can understand them, which means you can project onto them, and then you can watch them go through some insane. Even if you're talking about Star Wars or something like that, there's still a human story at the heart of it. It's the hero's journey. It's the so it's allegory and subtext. In that case, not desperately deep subtext, but it's there. And
that's that framework, and you're absolutely right. It's almost like you've read the book too, because he does say there's a 3. Some people use a 5 frame, and then there's 7, depending on the complexity. But and the protagonist you mentioned there, again going sort of a little bit off topic, but I think it's worth mentioning. He does talk about how the writer, not AI, but the writer sometimes becomes so. A lot of the time they are representing their own person with it when they're writing. So a good writer can detach themselves as well and look at the audience seeing themselves, because they get so attached to the protagonist, and they see themselves through that lens, not as the person reading, but as the author of the book, and actually they can make them too perfect. So actually they and also sometimes go on too long, because they don't want to give up that. It's almost like autobiographical. It's sort of like writing an autobiography, but through sort of fictional characters.
Well, and also we've got into much more now. Movies are still a thing, of course, but we've gotten much more into TV, which episodic TV, serialized television. The act structure gets more complex. So, and even now, when you look at something like, comic books for a start, so just the graphic novels, and I mean like the act, not the films, but the graphic novels were always, and it's the same thing with soap operas as well. It's basically all second act. It's very, because they've never ended, have they? Yes, I know characters get killed off and get brought back and all the, the usual things, but basically nothing ever ends. So you're always dealing with, certain plot elements may reach a resolution, but you're still on the character's journey. EastEnders or whatever, name a soap opera. Yes, characters come and go, but that whole thing is still, it's more like it's a world you're viewing, not.
That might bring it back into business then, because if you're following a business owner or a business's journey as they grow, that doesn't stop after 1 month or after 3 hours. You're watching our story now play out in sort of real time. It's very meta.
Yeah, and that's what we attach ourselves to. That's what we look for. I do it whenever I watch something. I go, if there's something in there that I can relate to, that then gives me that sort of token, if you like, to imprint myself on that person and follow their journey and sympathise with or not sympathise with decisions they make. I mean, even if you've set up a good protagonist and they're going to make mistakes, you're still going to root for them. You're still going to because you've put some of yourself.
Well, how many times have we watched a movie go? You think there's the second character who's the sort of the bad guy, the anti, but then maybe there might be a second movie, or later on you start to root for them because again that storyline changes.
Well, so they play with that. I mean, like someone like Hannibal Lecter, you know, you kind of like him. You don't want to like him because he's, apart from the eating people, he's quite enticing. But that's the point. Yeah. You know, that's the point. Everyone in his orbit gets kind of sucked in by him, and by Hannibal, the second film. I mean, well, it's actually the third film because there was Manhunter and then Silence of the Lambs, and then that wasn't
it. Red Dragon.
Red Dragon's the third film of that, because technically Silence of the Lambs is a sequel to Manhunter, which was the Michael Mann's version of Red Dragon.
Okay.
So
it's going
complicated. That was the first novel, and then he wrote Silence of the Lambs as a follow-up to it, which is the film that kind of blew it. And it's what everyone kind of sees as the first one. But Brian Cox was Hannibal Lecter in Manhunter. But anyway, it's another story. But anyway,
swiftly through to business. I was going to like so back to you business owners and the movie buffs are still with us. Okay. So applying it to business, I sort of thought protagonist, problem, how we then. What we can do is we can put that and then that can go through transformation. So when you're talking about a business and you're sort of saying that it maps really well into sort of success stories, case studies, because I think if you're going to say on your website, we're great, or this was excellent, or good customer service, it doesn't really mean anything. It's just words. Whereas if you create a story and say, instead of this being this was a great success or we're really excellent, you actually replace that with John had a business and he was just ready to close the doors of his dream enterprise. He was considering going back to work, back to full-time employment, when X solution came in and made all of his problems go away, and he's now more profitable than ever and looking to employ X amount of staff. That's a real story that people can attach to and understand. I've probably butchered that as hundreds of different better ideas, but just as a principle, you've gone from just explaining what you do to a story-led theme. I mean, in another way, you could look at a luxury dog groomers and think, okay, well, they might put deluxe shampoo or air-dried. I don't know how deluxe dog groomers operate, but whatever they would. But instead, if they used words that are much more emotive and said, "We treat your dog like royalty because they're family," that then goes from it being logical to actually hitting the heart.
Yeah, I think there's two ways to frame it. You either frame your business story as you are the protagonist. So, for example, applying that to Copper Sprocket, it might be that you talk about your mission. And that's good for you, and it's good for your team to understand that as well, because it gives them So, for example, in my case, it's at the vendor end to supply, very highly skilled, expert filmmaking technicians with regular, flexible work, and then for the client, it's to bring them a film crew for their marketing budget, rather than and deliver very high-end, very narrative-driven cinematic video content. So there you are, and then for everyone to do well off the back of it. That's kind of my story. The other way around to do it is to say, you're the supporting character in their story. So your example of Jeff or John or whatever his name was, who's so John is the cipher for the person reading it. So he could be made up, but it's like John was, like you said, going to close these doors, and what business owner hasn't been there before? Hopefully you're not, but I know I have, and it's so immediately someone goes, well, yeah, maybe they're there now. It could be because they found you that way, and he went through, and you're describing his journey, and they're relating to it, and then we did this, and that's how blah. Then you've got that's your second act, if you like. That's your inciting incident, or maybe the inciting incident is that he lost a client or his business was doing.
And I think that even, I mean, we've touched on niche before, and I don't want to go too much over that topic in today's episode, but that again, if you have a niche, you can really delve into that story and hit the imagination of your potential target market as well.
That's your backdrop, that's your world, if you like, your niche. You know, in our case, maybe it's luxury travel. Great, gives you a really clear backdrop of, you know, or if you're in SaaS, you know, we do software as a service for X.
But I guess the AA and the RAC, that's why their videos or their advertisements show you broken down on the side of a road, because actually if you've ever been in that position before, you know how frustrating that would be, and it then becomes so much more emotive.
Well, yeah, I mean,
it's a story.
Yeah, of course.
They don't just put adverts on there or some guy saying, we will come and collect you, we will do this, we will do that. They show a video of somebody in distress and then somebody coming to save them.
Yeah, all advertising is a story, all marketing is a story. You know, it's just how well you tell it. And yeah, of course, people do a bad job of it a lot of the time. And it's usually the ones who either try and do it themselves or, you know, like you said, if someone's writing a protagonist, their ego just gets in the way all the time. And of course you want to talk about, it's like you write your own blurb for your website. Who hasn't done that? And it's too convoluted. It doesn't make sense. I'm guilty of it. I mean, I'm working on it now.
I review mine, and I think sometimes, you know, as we go through this stuff, we learn more, and I think, oh, actually, yeah, I've put trusted by many people, find, you know, the place to go to if you want to find, okay, it's true, but it's trying to, you've got to go beyond that. And I think we're just so programmed to factually, logically say we're going to touch on Rory Sutherland later, because I think he's obviously a big voice on that. So it kind of going from logical through to emotive.
100%. Well, and thank you, by the way, for I had watched a lot of Alex Hormozi in the past, but James sent me a specific episode of his podcast a while ago, and I've saved it and I've listened back to it so many times. But what was my point with that? Oh yeah, he said about I think it's a Warren Buffett quote, or I could be butchering that. He said that 80% of your ad spend or marketing spend is on the headline, because that's what sells. You know, you need to pour 80%. Like I guess it's a Pareto principle thing, but you need to pour 80% into the headline, because if that doesn't work, the rest of it's irrelevant.
80%.
80%.
Yeah, like
so
that.
just refine.
That wasn't from the episode I sent you, was it? Or was it?
No, it wasn't from a different episode, but.
I'm gonna write that down.
Made a lot of sense, you know, and he says, yeah, he spends hours and hours and hours sweating over it, you know, and I've tried to do that as well. And you can even use AI, like use ChatGPT as a sort of sounding board, throw it at it, go, let's refine that down. Okay, refine it to a message where I want 3 words that just says this, and just when you think you've done it, break it and fix it again.
Well, that's a brilliant segue, because the next thing I wanted to sort of stay with Will Storr and talk about truthful storytelling in the AI age. And now I'm really passionate about this because I've done a lot of research. I've also read another book on AI and humankind, which we can talk about on another podcast, which I think people will find really interesting, because I know there's a lot of concerns. There's a lot of people either just sticking their head in the sand, which is definitely not what you want to do. No. But then there's also worry that all of our jobs are going to be taken. Now, that I think that this other book I've read is really shed some light on that. But one of the things Will Storr said, and one of the lines that stood out, and again, I'm going to read this. This is directly from him. The reader doesn't want to be told what to feel. They want to discover it for themselves.
Yeah.
So I'll repeat that. The reader doesn't want to be told what to feel. They want to discover it for themselves. And I think that's really really relevant in today's business environment, because everybody's just telling everybody what to feel. But actually, you've got to let clients make their own mind up. Mm-hmm. And like I say, with regards to AI, when you are producing content, I mean, I do use AI in my own business, but as a guide, as an assistant. Mm. And I think what we're going to be doing is we already are being overwhelmed with artificial sort of generated images, videos, stuff that is quite funny and gimmicky at the start, but actually that wears off very quickly. And I think that actually starts to build distrust. Because I saw an advert from a guy the other day, and he looked like he got an advertisement in a train station, and I thought, wow, that's pretty cool. I mean, and then I looked closer. I'm like, I think that's King's Cross, and I thought, Jesus, that he must have some budget. And do those screens even allow you to put an advertisement on? And I just looked a bit closer, and that's when I realised it was AI. And the first thing I thought then, my immediate reaction, my feeling to that was one of distrust.
Yeah.
I felt that I was being misled.
100%.
And I think actually, so what somebody's thought of is a really clever idea. They've used AI, and in principle, probably with good intentions, but actually what the end result there probably backfires. And I think, I'm probably a bit ahead here with my views on this, but I think more and more people will start to see AI as a useful tool, but they'll then lean into human stories, human reactions, and it might even be something that you actually advertise and go, we hire real people over here. We've used human, or we've integrated technology with the human touch. And I think that's where businesses going forward can win and can maybe feel a little bit more comfortable in the current age we're going through.
I think AI is something we need. AI media is something we have to get out of our system, because there's too much vested interest. There's too many people trying to push it, which means we just have to suffer through the fact that it's going to have to crash and burn. People, like, it goes back to what I said about people want the human connection. You don't watch a movie or content or anything. You don't read anything. You don't do anything. How many people sit down of an evening and get out a Haynes manual? Like, you don't read stuff. You only do that to find out how to do one thing. And so it's the same thing with video. I mean, video. Going back to what to the Storr's quote about the reader doesn't want to be told what to feel. That, and another to translate that to another phrase that's used in the film industry is show don't tell. And the amount of times, because you see this, the way modern films are made, and the backlash against CGI has been very similar. Hence Christopher Nolan does everything practically, even nuclear explosions. But that's his commitment. It's got to be in camera, it's got to be authentic, and a black hole, and stuff like that. Fine, great. He's the master of it, and not everyone can do that, of course. But I genuinely, it goes back to what I said, and I've said this. I've challenged AI acolytes to answer this question a million times. How does this help the end user? How does this improve the user experience? And none of them have an answer. They go, well, you can fire all the actors and all the crew and all. Yeah, but how does it improve the end product? And then they'll wang on about how it's photorealistic. Yeah, so's video.
But it's the same.
What's your point? How does that make some? And I agree entirely. I think people are going to. I think they already are very distrustful. I see ads all the time, and I'm like, clearly that's AI generated.
Well, there's never been anything like AI before, but we can still look back at previous things and get a good measure of how humans react. And I think Die Hard was one. The first two Die Hard movies, awesome. I think it was by Die Hard 3 they started using crazy CGI.
Great,
was it 3 or which was it 4?
3 I love.
It might have been 4 then. There's one where a car goes off a Spaghetti Junction bridge thing, and
it launches a car at a helicopter.
And I switch off.
Silly.
I switch off because I think and okay, all the Avengers movies, I know they've done really well, so there's probably going to be people shouting at screens or the microphones. But so I suppose maybe there is a place, and this is actually probably goes full circle. I feel there is a place for AI, and I like it. I actually am pro AI, but with measured and responsible integration, and I think it needs to be governed by humans. And I think and I also want to see in the future any AI generated images, I want there to be technology, and I want to be there humans in the background that are acknowledging what is generated by AI, and it almost has to have a disclaimer with it. Yeah. So people aren't because it's got so good now that there will be people that are either misled, and then it'll be used for all sorts of all the wrong reasons as well. So
it could go one of two ways. I think hopefully I believe in education. I believe in people, knowing the facts, and I suppose the problem is you will always be able to manipulate enough people for it to be worth it. But because you could generate an AI thing of Donald Trump machine gunning orphans or something.
But it doesn't mean anything.
But,
it might be funny, but like you can't...
Well, no, but my point is, and then trying to convince people that's real. I've seen people now do AI generated podcasts and stuff like that, and they go, I saw it, they were advertising. It's like, yes, you can have an AI podcast, and it's two people sitting like this chatting. It's like, but it's two AI generated people.
We want the reason we go to concerts, the reasons we go and see comedians. I think I saw a comedian video on Instagram the other day for a water advert where they were using an AI comedian pretending he was in a comedy club talking about people using bottled water. Now, I don't know for sure that it was AI because it was very well done, but it felt AI. And then when I realized it was an advert, I was like, this, and again, mistrust. I didn't like it. But the reason we go and see actual comedians, the reasons we go and see bands, the reason we go and go to the theatre, well, maybe not the theatre for this, but we want to see humans think of ideas and share ideas, or one person think about something and go, oh, I think this about that. What do you think? Or ask questions. And I think we've always wanted that, and AI can't replace a founder's journey. It can't sort of, Duncan started his business 4 years ago, and nobody can, only you have that story, and then you can use the tools of AI to help you come up with content ideas, help it maybe generate other bits, or give you editing software and do other parts. But originally, the origin of that story has to come from you, which is a human, and that is a human story. And I think that's a good way to cap that bit off, really, because I think we can talk about also Dan Sullivan and how he maybe comes into this as well. Yeah,
of course. Yeah. I mean, I can talk about this stuff forever, that. So,
well, I don't know. Please, I mean, once we've got to like 100 episodes, we can start to see, maybe people will start on like 3-hour episodes. I mean, I think our businesses will need to have gone to the next stage so we can actually afford the extra time.
That's true.
We do, I guess, as a side note here, we really have to be efficient with our times on these. So we try and we're currently on fortnightly, which we're sticking to. We've obviously reached the 10 episode marker. And we do plan to do more of this, have guests on, but at the moment we are both running businesses which take up a lot of our time. We have families, so this bit of time, I think sort of 30 to 40 minutes is sort of our
it's our sweet spot, I think, in that work.
But if people want the 3-hour episode, I'm all for it. We'll get there. Once we get to million subs, then.
And it also helps when you start out to distill messaging and really work on refinement, I think, before going to that level. So
definitely.
Yeah.
So talk to me about Dan. I've watched, I've listened to a couple of podcasts that he's been on.
Oh, yeah.
It might have been his, is it Magnetic or some I can't remember. He's got a podcast that I've listened to. Yeah. He's fairly more senior sort of guy.
He is. He's a gentleman. He's the same age as, I think he might be a year older than my dad. He's 82, I think. But he's going to live to 160 something, whatever it is. He basically calculates his the age he's going to die at, and he encourages people to do it for various reasons. But he's a big believer in that. He's a remarkable guy. He's Canadian, I believe. He's the founder of Strategic Coach, which I think he started in the 80s, and they are now global. Really fascinating and amazing, network and coaching, and I, as I said,
one of his things is about pairing with other people, isn't it?
Well, it's so who not how. I mean, obviously that is sort of self-explanatory in a way.
Yeah.
And the book does. The one criticism I have.
Well, we talked about Science of the Lambs earlier, and that is nothing about lambs. So
that's true.
Don't always go with the title of the book.
Yeah. But it's essentially talking about the solution to problems is based in who's and why that's effective, and why, because oftentimes we go, how do I do this, or how can I do that? Especially in an age of information where we do have the hows at our fingertips, we can go find out how to do something, but actually it's so much more efficient to find a who already knows how to do that. And of course, the problem of, as a business owner, a lot of us will go, but I don't have the budget for that.
That's what I just wrote down, budget. I agree, but you get to this sort of size, and it's sort of, you really have to cherry pick sometimes where your budget goes, and it can go off in so many different places. That's my big thing with the who. I get it. Obviously, then you've got to find people that are reliable, that share your values, that are consistent, and everything else. But also, initially, you need that budget to spend on them.
I saw a quote from Alex Hormozi the other day actually that said, and I'm going to butcher it, but it was along the lines of hiring the cheapest people you can will be the biggest waste of money you've ever made or something. You know, it was like basically it's far more efficient to pay people max over market and that's true. But again, not everyone's in that position.
Well, he's got a thing. We're really promoting Alex Hormozi here. I mean, he's a bit. I quite like him, but I think is he a bit Marmite?
I don't know.
I guess from Brits, he's American, obviously. So maybe Americans would. Maybe some Brits might not find him. Anyway,
he'll no doubt at some point
he'll
say
pop
something
up on
controversial, and then he'll be
well, just more. He walks around with a vest top on, and he's all like he's a gym guy. So, but. The point I was going to make about Goffert here is he talks a lot about hiring external consultants or let's say it's a marketing campaign, and he says hire the best, but then ask them how to do it, install them for 3 months, and then you or your team then replicate that and then install it in your own business, which is a bit of a different take.
Yeah, he says like you set them up and you say, look, I'm going to pay you X, your top package or whatever for 3 months, but part of that is I want you to train my team on how to do it, and then we'll put you on a retainer model or something, so they don't feel like they're just going to get cut out of the process. But he did, I mean,
obviously, some businesses might find that they're then kind of cannibalizing their own business. So I guess it depends on the industry and what the topic is. But yeah, interesting concept.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's interesting, but that's down the road when you've got a team.
Yeah, but I guess if you've got a solo guy or woman, I think when you were doing something that was tech building or building software development or something, I guess you could. I guess that's sort of what an internship or an apprenticeship would be, though. Really, you'd probably do it the opposite way. You go into a business, learn it, then leave. I suppose it's a way of saying, look, those functions that would ordinarily be in house, that you're planning to put in house, like marketing, like accounting, like all sorts of stuff, fine, like make sure that it's an educational process, not just an outsourced thing that you do. He's interesting. But who not how is when I was reading it, I was sort of bristling at it and kind of going like, I get it, hire someone who can do it. Like you don't need this weighty tome to tell me that but it actually isn't like that. And there's lots of examples of using who's and why. Are there stories?
There are stories. There are lots of really great stories. And I grabbed a passage here. It's from towards the end of the book, page 155.
That's a nice bookmark you've got there, Duncan.
Thank you. It's a train receipt. I do have a very nice bookmark that my wife had made for me, but it's currently sat betwixt the pages of my friend's novel that he wrote that I promised I'd read and still haven't finished. Because, I'm an orphalegate, and I'd very rarely. I'll basically get in bed, go right, start reading, and I'll get a chapter out of me, and then I'm done.
It served its purpose.
But so this was. I was just reading this last night, and there's lots more passages that I'm sure would be worthwhile to people. And this isn't quite so. It's along the lines of who not how, but it says a keystone concept in psychology is known as the fundamental attribution error, also known as correspondence bias or over-attribution effect, which is the tendency for people to overemphasize dispositional or personality-based explanations for how a person acts while underemphasizing situational explanations. So, in other words...
Please do that in other words.
So, in other words, we tend to attribute to people's actions their personality, to say to them the reason they did something, or the reason they're good at something, or the reason that they blah, 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 is because of who they are, not their situation. And so, this is another who, not how. So, the point is to surround yourself with people you want to be like, in order that your situation dictates your outcome. And again, that's another sort of offshoot of who not how. It's about because a lot of us exist in isolation. I know I do. I know you do. We sit in those four walls with our heads in our hands, going, "How the hell am I going to make this work today?" Yeah. And actually, you need to find ways of just being in the room with other people who you aspire to be like.
Definitely.
So make your whatever attribution error. People will be saying it's because you're who you are. Again, we talk about famous people, we talk about celebrities all the time, and often we attribute to them their success as being a part of who they are, and actually, if you dig down into it, it's not. It's because they knew who to surround themselves with.
Yeah, I remember listening to a podcast with Bear Grylls on, and I remember him. He was very humble, and it was sickeningly humble.
Yeah.
But he was everything he said. Every compliment he got, he almost put it back to his team.
Yeah.
And actually, when you think of these people, they achieved so many projects. They need to be surrounded. Mr. Beast. I remember him listening to him. Actually, I mean, he's quite a wise guy. Actually, I didn't. I think it was Diary of a CEO, and he was talking about it. I think he's like 25 or 26 or something. Amazing. And obviously, there's a whole nother story there. But one of the things he was again attributing things to was effectively getting good people in and mobilizing them. Elon is obviously a great example of that. I mean, actually, I put him on my things here. I thought I'd mention what I think. Rory Sutherland, as I mentioned earlier, I've read his book, Alchemy. Yeah. Another massive shout out to that book, which is amazing. I mean, if you haven't, if you're in marketing or business owner, again, the same thing as earlier, but definitely if you're into marketing, Rory Sutherland's book on Alchemy is just incredible. You need to read it as well. Don't listen to it. It's got all these like footnotes in it, and it's absolutely incredible. The guy's an absolute genius. But his phrase is, he's got a classic line, which is, logic is a tool, not a strategy. And I think that really epitomizes the idea of, and again, as somebody who's a bit of a perfectionist, very analytical, I have to keep reminding myself of that, because I always think, well, logically, this wins. And especially in finance, it's all a numbers game. But when it comes to the marketing side, you have to switch from logic to story.
Yeah, I think where that gets bound up, and the same is, this happens in the film industry as well, is people overspending or spending outside of their comfort zone, whether that's in cash terms or in sweat equity. You know, people... movies, for example, I think partly because the chasm between very low budget and high budget has been hollowed out. You've now got no speculation in the film industry, which means everyone's spending 300 million, 400 million on a movie, you know, including marketing, and they can't afford to take a punt. You know, it's got to make a return. It's got to be guaranteed, which is why then you get all these algorithms creeping in and them saying, well, we need to, this for Gen X has to be in there, and we have to have a thing about that. And before you know it, they've micromanaged what should be a creative endeavor into the ground, because it just doesn't, they're just ticking boxes. And the same is true in marketing. I think Rory Sutherland had another quote about, like, marketing should be conspicuously wasteful. It should at least have the appearance of being, like, you didn't need to say that. Why did you say that? It's like, why does Google advertise? Yeah. You know, but that's not the point. You know, and so it's and he's right. Logic is a tool, not a strategy.
Well, it's there were some examples. I looked a few up just to kind of think. Gymshark was one where they're sort of selling the identity, not the apparel. So when they started out, they started out in a garage. It was more about sort of we're against the norm, going along the journey. And overall, they've obviously been really, really successful. But the clients or the customers go on that journey with the business owner and with the brand.
Do you think there's a danger of oversaturation in that? Because here's an example: mouse cases drive me nuts. I hate those adverts. They're so obnoxious. You know, some twat throwing an iPhone off a multi-story car park and yelling about mouse or whatever. And now they've tried to shift to narrative, brand driven. When we started out, blah blah blah. And it's like, you make like phone cases, like they're blatantly manufactured in India or wherever.
Well,
it's not like,
and eventually get sold out. I mean, with Gymshark, I've forgotten the guy's name now. What's his name?
I don't know. Jeff Sharp.
It was really annoying. I'll come back on that. But but anyway, no. He's actually gone back in a CEO, so they sold out, and then he then left the business and then went back in. So again, it's almost like recreating that story. And I guess it does get oversaturated to a certain point because we only hear about the winners of that. I'm thinking Apple and Steve Jobs and the story and going against the norm. Nike, you got I don't know if you read Shoe Dog. We're talking about stories and books here again. Another shout out to that. Brilliant. Phil Knight, the founder of Nike. Brilliant story, but again they were sort of challenging the establishment and Adidas at the time, who were the big players, and they sort of went with athletes, which at the time was a big thing. Nowadays that would be the opposite, so it goes full circle. You've got Ben and Jerry's, apparently each ice cream has an underlying story to it.
Oh yeah.
So
we know fish food, it was one of the most popular flavours. Do you know what I'm talking about?
No, I know about the flavour. Yeah, it's got the little fish in it.
PH, because it's named after. They name them after bands. We don't really know Fish in this country, but they're a big band in America. Yeah. Dave Matthews Band have one called One Sweet World, as in like world, and they're one of their again a band that's not very popular here, but is huge in America. So they're all named after different bands.
And then you go, and we mentioned Elon earlier. You go to colonising Mars. It's a story, isn't it? And it's all these things.
A moonshot as well. Moonshots there's a lot about moonshots in here. We don't have time for that now, but that's moonshots.
But essentially, we're only talking about one element. Just having a good story isn't enough. You need to have other things as well. So this is just one element of your branding, your marketing, your identity. And I think, story, as we've hopefully shared with you now, becomes a big part of it. So hopefully that gives you a bit of a flavour of why story is important. There's loads of content out there, and maybe you know a bit about this. Maybe this is the first time you've thought about story within your underlying message within your business. So that might just spark something. Go and do some research on how you can build story into your brand. And it doesn't matter what you've got. It doesn't matter if you've got an accountancy firm or a dog grooming business. You can find story in anything.
100%. Well, should we wrap it up there then?
I think we should.
Thank you all for listening. Do please leave us a review if you would be so kind on whatever platform you're listening to this on. Like, subscribe, all the good stuff. We hope this has been really interesting for you. And we'll see you again next time. Please, share this as well with anyone who you think it might be useful for, because that really helps too. Yeah. And
definitely
reach out, leave us a comment.
Yeah. Or a question.
Happy
to answer. I mean, we can't guarantee that it will be answered eloquently, but we'll try our best.
Yeah, we'll do our best. So, thank you all. We'll see you next time.
Thank you.